who want to legalize marijuana are suggesting that they got to put the full court press on.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Pleasure to have you aboard. Thanks very much for tuning in to my State of Mind this evening. The guy who's been doing a pretty good job trying to convince everyone to legalize marijuana is here again tonight, Jared Moffett. This time he says they're a little fed up, and there's a rally that's going to happen coming up in the next week or so to try to convince legislators not to postpone the decision to legalize marijuana, something that I'm still interestedly ambivalent about. But more and more reading I'm doing gives me more and more pause myself, and so we'll challenge Jared Moffett with some of that tonight. Nice to have you aboard. Thanks for tuning into my State of Mind. Let's go over to the rundown and see what's happening here. Sally Yates was absolutely, unequivocally unflappable yesterday. Headlines in Washington. This was interesting. She expected the White House to take action on General Mike Flynn because she came and suggested that there was no question a worry about potential even blackmail, and that was problematic. And Sheldon Whitehouse, who had a significant role in the hearing yesterday, is puzzled, as I think a lot of us are, about how the White House doesn't reach those kinds of conclusions. But I will tell you that amongst the things that I thought was kind of interesting yesterday was her overall composure and her ability to just kind of whack everybody back. I mean, this is a veteran employee of U.S. government and somebody who has been widely respected for both her prosecutorial skill and her overall, more or less politically unbiased viewpoint. Even Ted Cruz thought he could get a piece of her. Listen to this dialogue and how she kind of just whacked him back.
By this express text of the statute, it says, quote, whenever the president finds that the entry of any alien or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may, by proclamation and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem appropriate. Would you agree that that is broad statutory authorization?
I would, and I am familiar with that, and I'm also familiar with an additional provision of the INA that says no person shall receive preference or be discriminated against in issuance of a visa because of race, nationality, or place of birth. That, I believe, was promulgated after the statute that you just quoted. And that's been part of the discussion with the courts with respect to the INA, is whether this more specific statute trumps the first one that you just described. But my concern was not an INA concern here. It rather was a constitutional concern, whether or not this the executive order here violated the Constitution, specifically with the Establishment Clause and equal protection and due process.
It's like I'll cite your statute and double down, right? And at the end, we don't have the audio right here, but at the end, Ted Cruz more or less thought he had her by suggesting that when in the last 200 years has the Justice Department's leader, meaning the Attorney General, and remember she was acting Attorney General under the new Trump administration, when is the acting or appointed Attorney General ever reversed, ignored, or denied Justice Department policy? And she said, well, more or less, I'm not sure about that, but I know this. It's probably a good idea that you actually advise the acting Attorney General as to what you're thinking. I mean, she just literally depantsed Ted Cruz. And for anybody to suggest differently, even some of the more conservative commentary out there, which I guess I'm not a part of anymore because I see things, what? Objectively? Regarding the Trump administration? I don't know what they're looking at. I don't know what hearing they were looking at. Anyway, fascinating stuff. Sheldon Whitehouse is going to join me on the radio, Friday, to talk more about this. So make an appointment. Remember, Dan York, 3 to 6 weekdays on WPRO as well. All righty. Going to the dumpy schools concept here. I'll never forget the first time I actually moved into Rhode Island. We were shopping for a house. My wife was very concerned about the condition of the schools. At the time, my little one was going into kindergarten. There's no doubt that when you visit Rhode Island schools en masse, you get a general sense that they're just not very nice. They're old, they're decrepit. Of course, they're, some school districts that have invested in some of the school buildings, no doubt, but it's a general malaise, and finally everybody's kind of catching up to it. The State of Education address yesterday was offered by the commissioner, who was here the other day, and of course he touts progress and always does. He talked about the notion that we shouldn't be embarrassed about borrowing some expertise from Massachusetts. He mentioned that last week when he was here as well.
About me or any individual person, this is about long-term sustainability and what are the best partnerships that we can put into place to increase our game, our teaching and learning for the long haul. And I think that's really the reason why Massachusetts has seen such dramatic results.
You know, I'm also happy to see that the General Assembly members called a press conference for earlier today, at least it was on the schedule, to talk about school building conditions. I mean, we're going to have a specific funding mechanism to be able to attack that. Every year the governor slides some more dough into there and the General Assembly gives a skosh, but we have a practical emergency when it comes to the conditions of our schools. And by the way, we want our kids to get better educationally, but we put them in dumps in order to get it done. I mean, you know, your environment has a lot to do with how you think about things, and the message we send to our kids is, you don't count. It's got to change. All right, I just wanted to note, this came out on WPRI.com yesterday. I thought it was very interesting. Dan McGowan, of course, is our leading journalist when it comes to the city of Providence. And he just mentioned a little bit of an audit that it's $150,000 for this guy, Kevin Jackson, to be recalled and replaced. $150,000. He's crying out about, you know, how he's the hero of the neighborhood.
Hope is the first African-American community, not only in the city of Providence, but in the state of Rhode Island. Do not let what happened to Benefit Street happen to Mount Hope.
Yeah. But you'd think in a city that's financially strapped like this, and with a charge of 6 figures worth of embezzlement, that you would step aside without all this rigmarole and not cause your neighborhood and the rest of the city $150,000 of expense to get you out of there. Now, there would have been a little bit of expense for an election to replace him, but they're already at $90,000 to recall. I don't know. You know, politicians put themselves ahead of the people while trying to convince the people that it's all about the people. You can smell them coming a couple of miles away, can't you? All right. Speaking of smell, I don't know. It's a distinct smell, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't it? We don't have to talk about that. It's stinky pot. But the people who want it think it's kind of stinky as to what's going on at the State House. So Jared's been on a few times. Well, there's all sorts of ways to get into a conversation. It is a little stinky, don't you think?
It's got some different odors to it, yeah.
Anyway, welcome. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
You're all jacked here, it seems to me, based on a little narrative you sent to us. Interesting, we had State Senator Josh Miller, who's got new legislation that he wants to have passed for marijuana recreational legalization. We talked at length about that last night, both on the radio and, well, actually, we talked a little bit on the TV last night and at length on the radio. We'll give you some of his thoughts. So he's trying to create some momentum here to pass first, fix later, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But you've got your dander up a little bit, huh? You're going to create a rally and try to do what?
Yeah, so we're having a rally on Tuesday, May 16th, 4:30 to 6:30 at the State House. And, you know, really, this is bigger than just marijuana at this point. It's also about how the state makes policy and how things get done. I mean, when 3 out of 5 Rhode Islanders support a reform, we think that the legislature should debate it on the floor and hold a vote. And that's really all we're asking. And, you know, even if we get defeated, even if the legalization vote doesn't go the way we want it to, we'd prefer that rather than be ignored. As you heard Senator Miller say, this is the 7th year that legislation to legalize marijuana has been introduced, and we've never had a vote. And so, you know, with 60% of the public on our side, we're saying, don't kick the can down the road, let's have a vote this year.
Well, listen, there's 2 conversations there that I think are fascinating. One, that, you know, you're bringing up kind of a process and protocol issue at the General Assembly, you know, via your advocacy. And you've been up there enough to really kind of get the ropes, because you've been hanging around the State House for a couple of years now trying to get this thing done, right?
Learn a little bit,
Learn a little bit. But the other idea is that there's some close connection between polling data and doing the right diligence on legislation. just because 60% of the people in general
Mm-hmm.
will respond to a simple question about legalization of marijuana, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a green light. Do not pass go, do not collect $200, like hurry up and get it done.
Sure, and we're just saying let's have a vote. We're just saying that the constituents, the
But
voters of the
crafting
state.
the legislation for
Yeah.
a proper vote is really what it's all about, right? I mean,
Sure, and we're not, so I think there's two types of study that could happen. There's a studying if legalization should happen, and there's a study of how legalization should happen. So we're absolutely in favor of the legislature taking time, slowing things down to study how it should be done. But in terms of public opinion, it's very clear that the state wants to move forward in terms of ending prohibition. We believe that it's failed, and 60% of the public believes that it's failed. So we think it's the job of the General Assembly to get us on a path towards legalization. So we're not insisting that it be done any specific way. And I'm happy to hear Senator Miller talking about there's plans to come up with some type of compromise. We're open to slowing things down, to having more conversations about specific regulations, but we do want the legislature to vote up or down on moving forward on legalization. So that's what we're asking for.
All right, we'll talk a little bit more about if or how with Jared when we get back and offer some of Senator Miller's thoughts on our next segment. But I just want to remind you that if you're looking to upgrade your sophistication banking-wise, literally in the palm of your hand, the Card Valet is the way to go. Mobile banking features, let me cheat here and just give you a couple. You know, get the old glasses on here. You can pay your bills, deposit checks, transfer money, set limits on your spending, use Apple or Samsung Pay, send and receive cash right through texts. It's that simple. Never mind navigantcu.org, which is a wonderful website, all revamped. Card Valet is an app you want to get. All you got to do is become a member of Navigant Credit Union, member NCUA, of course, insured. Enjoy life's journey with Navigant, like so many of us do. We'll be right back.
If I was a betting man, I would have to say that it would be turned into a commission, and we'll be studying that issue.
How we regulate it, what the regulations are, and to what extent we regulate it. It's going to be important to the passage of the bill at some point in time, or if it goes on the ballot at some point in time.
Senators Ruggiero and McCaffrey. Senator Ruggiero is scheduled to join us on Monday up next week. Make a program note on that. Lukewarmish. It looks like the whole thing is kind of slowed down. Let's pick this thing apart again. 60% of those polled, and of course the data comes from where?
So the latest poll is from Public Policy Polling, but there's multiple polls nationally as well showing about 60% of the public is behind legalization at this point.
Is the public well enough informed on all aspects of this debate to levy a responsible decision on this?
I mean, look, we're asking the legislature to decide, but yeah, I think we've had, many years. This is, we've had a public debate for years now, and we've seen year after year support goes up in each poll that's done in Rhode Island and nationally. So I think, the public has heard both sides, and I think that, look, it's common sense. People look at the fact that Massachusetts is doing it, and they say, what are we going to do by not acting in Rhode Island? People are still going to be able to cross the border. People look at alcohol and they say, well, why are we criminalizing marijuana, which is safer than alcohol, but we are okay with tobacco and alcohol? So I think for a lot of the public, it's just a common sense issue. Again, the details of how to regulate it do need to be worked out, and I think that's the role that the legislature should play. But in terms of the big concept, the public has already decided. We're ready to move forward.
I'm not sure, and I get your argument, but I'm not sure I can remember ever supporting, I'm sure it's been done before, but I can't remember ever supporting passing a concept and then working on the details later. And some of the things that I'm concerned about are how to establish really what the finances are going to be around this whole thing, right? The dollars and cents of taxation. Mm-hmm. And I know your argument is that regulation saps the black market, brings everybody out into the open, mm-hmm. and all of that. But it seems to me that there's also some growing data that even places like Colorado have seen a significant steadiness or uptick in black market because of the price differential that goes along with the black market being discounted against taxes that seem to price the legitimate product out of the marketplace.
Well, we hear that talking point from opponents a lot, but what it forgets is that there's a cost of doing business in an illegal market. There's the risk that's involved. Your product can be stolen. There's all sorts of issues and businesses that you can't solve with an illegal market, right? So bringing it above ground makes the business more efficient. You're also able to scale up, which brings the price down. So we've seen the price in Colorado decrease, and regulators are now testifying in public and saying that about 75% of the demand for marijuana in Colorado is being met by the legal market. So have we totally eliminated it? No, but no one ever said it was going to go away completely overnight. But we have seen a massive reduction in the illicit market, and over time,
is the taxation, lessons learned there something that we should be adopting here? Meaning they're pretty heavily taxed over there, and even with legitimate tobacco, which is legal, sort of, in America today. I mean, we have really taxed the living daylights out of that product, getting people to try to quit. But the black market behavior in New York, for instance, with taxation at $4.50 a pack or whatever, is it the highest in the country? Meaning the higher the taxes on regulated legal product, the more people are going to try to find it elsewhere. So,
and there's definitely a sweet spot in terms of taxation. You don't want to tax it too much that people go back to the illegal market. Well, I think we're seeing in Washington it has a 37% tax rate, and they're still doing very well. And Colorado has about a 27% tax rate, and they're doing very well in terms of creating this legal market. Again, about 75% of the demand is being met by the legal market. So I think that shows you basically what the range could be.
What are some of the drafts here talking about?
The current legislation would put 30% tax, but Massachusetts is looking at something significantly lower. And again, that's something that the legislature can take time to debate. But in this session, we're asking to put the state on a path towards legalization. We don't have to solve all the regulatory questions right now, but the public is ready to move forward. And I think there should be a date by which marijuana does become legal, and I think it makes sense to make that date the same time it becomes legal for sale in Massachusetts, because we know people are going to be crossing the border. We need to stop treating our public, our people in our state as criminals, and stop treating this as a criminal issue. And so we're just asking the legislature to move forward, put us on a path. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly the way the current legislation is written.
When we come back, we'll tell you what Senator Miller is thinking here and how it goes along with Jared's strategy. Stay with us. Yeah, I'll call. So State Senator Josh Miller was here yesterday and kind of dropped this little idea where, hey, listen, why don't we pass the legislation, legalize recreational use of marijuana, and then put into commission for study those things that are debatable and still unanswered, which is an interesting way to go about business. He elaborated on the radio yesterday.
What we're going to propose is amending the legislation based on concerns for many, many components of tax and regulate, and the serious interest within the State House on going forward with a study commission is there was a study done in 2011 which led to decriminalization, which I was a co-chair of. And so if those who think we have to study again, and those who are really concerned about different components of a tax and regulate going forward, is we would have triggers based on commission recommendations.
Creative. He suggests. I said, well, where are you going to sell it? See, he's not looking for a spiritual commitment to legalizing marijuana. He's looking to legalize marijuana and then fill in details as it goes along, meaning that even recreational sales would happen out of the 3 existing medical marijuana facilities as we speak. Wouldn't you like to have stock in those in the interim period when we aren't selling, pot through corner stores?
Well, I think what he's saying is, and what we're certainly open to and supportive of, is moving in sort of a phased-in approach and having things go. People, if they want to slow things down and stretch out the timeline, I think that's fine. I think all we're saying is that it's time to have a vote on whether we should move forward or not. The opponents want to sort of continue to mire us down in this debate about if we should legalize. And I think, frankly, that the public has spoken on that. Massachusetts is moving forward, so it makes sense for us to move forward as well. In terms of the details of how regulations are implemented, let's bring experts together, let's bring stakeholders together to figure out those how questions. But let's get moving on that, because I think if we don't pass anything this year, then we're going to be behind the 8 ball, and again, we're going to have this same debate next year. So it's time for the legislature to stop kicking the can down the road. Let's get this process going.
But there's a difference between the 2 approaches. You'll be happy with some kind of almost resolution as opposed to statute that says we're spiritually committed to this and now we're going to study it in order to how to implement it. That you'd be satisfied with that if I hear you correctly. That would be a win for you. He's saying let's legalize it and worry about details as they come up or are dangling. And I think those are two distinct approaches.
I mean, there's a little bit of nuance between them, but again, we're fully in support of what Senator Miller is talking about. We're fine with going ahead and legalizing
well, I'm
possession.
sure the more you can get, the more you get, the more you'll be good with it.
Well, right, but I don't think there's that big of a difference between what I'm saying and what he's saying. I think there's a very similar sort of conceptual approach, which is let's do this in pieces. Let's have advisory boards come together. Let's have regulators get together and craft the regulations. But yeah, let's go ahead and move forward. Let's legalize it. We're in favor of setting a date for marijuana being legal. And again, I think that it makes sense to let's go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and get this process started. We can expand, we can phase it in as time goes on.
Would it be satisfactory to you guys to have a piece of legislation that actually then just goes to a 2018 referendum?
The issue with the referendum is that it would be non-binding, and so it wouldn't actually change the law. And I think that, again, you're looking at the end of 2018. Stores are already going to be open in Massachusetts. So I think that, look, we've debated this for years, and the public is behind it. We think that constituents deserve to know where their legislators stand. And I think putting it to a referendum, not the end of the world, but I think it's just another way to delay, and I think it's time to get the process started.
Yeah, I would love to see a deeper poll that not only, because I think you've accurately quoted the data, and I think on a casual level, a lot of people just don't think much about it. They're almost tired of hearing about it.
I don't blame them.
I mean,
That's why
I'm
it's
almost
time to
tired
vote.
of hearing about it as well. At the same time, I do think that this is the stutter that I end up with in this, and I think even though 60% will affirmatively poll on this, I do think there are some portion of that 60% that still stutters like I do about the entire thing, and I don't know what the answer to that is. There seems like an inevitability of this happening. It seems like our neighbors are probably going to get to it, if not before us.
Well, Massachusetts is already doing it, and now we see, Nevada's moving forward. They're going to have sales starting in July 1st.
Connecticut would be significant pressure if we got squeezed by both sides.
Yeah, and I think that's only a matter of time. And so I think, the conceptual debate is pretty simple. Do we want prohibition, which hasn't worked, which has only empowered illegal dealers, or do we want an above-ground regulated market where there can be public health and safety protections on the way it's sold, how it's sold, to whom it's sold? And I think that's where the public has said, yeah, clearly regulation is a smarter approach. The details of how that works, that's where regulators, policymakers need to come together and figure out some details.
Right.
But on the concept as a whole, I think it's a pretty simple decision.
So you're almost mad as hell not taking it anymore. You got a rally next Tuesday, right?
Yeah, and we hope that a lot of folks turn out. We think it's going to be a big crowd.
All right. So there you go. The saga continues. Pulling teeth, right? All right. Final word and we come back. A rally is going to move the State House that much, but sometimes it does. People can shake things up by raising the decibel range. Hey, Link Chafee, you've heard of him, our former governor and U.S. Senator, here tomorrow night for a comprehensive discussion. See you then. And on the radio at 3 tomorrow on WPRO. Good night.